Rogel Dorn glimmered in the brightening light, standing head and shoulders taller than Sigismund. The Primarch of the Imperial Fist was a demigod clad in adamantine and gold. Beside Dorn stood an astropath, a hunger-thin woman whose bent spine showed clearly under the green silk of her robe. Neither said anything, but Sigismund could feel that the conversation had just ended, the severe tension still hanging in the air. He knelt, the wind stirring his tabard against his armor.
"My thanks, mistress."
Dorn nodded to the withered astropath, who bowed and walked away.
"Rise, my son,"
he added. Sigismund rose slowly and looked up at his father, dark eyes glittering at him from a face of hard lines and unreadable stillness. Dorn smiled grimly. Sigismund knew what that meant. It meant the same as it had every day since they had returned to Terra.
"There is no word, my lord?"
asked Sigismund.
"None. The warp storms of Clunin would make communication unlikely, yes."
Dorn turned away. Out beyond the battlement, an eagle turned against the cold blue sky, skimming the edge of a plume of drifting smoke. Dorn's eyes followed it, tracing the spiral of its flight as it rose on a column of warm air. It had been many weeks since Dorn had heard and seen the evidence of his brother's treachery. Sigismund remembered the rage in his father's eyes. It was still there, he knew, wrapped in will and buried beneath layers of control. He knew it because it burned in him, a bright echo of his father's cold fury. Dorn had wanted to go and confront Horus himself, to hear the traitor's confession and bring retribution with his own hands. But duty had held him back, duty to the Emperor and the Imperium that Horus now sought to destroy. They had returned to Terra, but Dorn had sent his sons as emissaries of his anger. He had named it a retribution fleet. 30,000 Imperial fists and over 500 warships had struck out towards Istavan, a force grace enough to subdue 100 worlds, bearing a brother's wrath. Now a second force from many legions gathered to strike at Istavan, but no word had come from the retribution fleet.
"Word will come, my lord. The galaxy does not simply swallow a third of a legion." "Does it not?"
Dorn turned his dark eyes on Sigismund.
"War amongst the legions, Horus a traitor, the ground under our feet becomes the sky. Can we be sure that we know anything for certain?"
"You have been listening too much to the worries of the Council, my lord," said Sigismund in a level voice. Fear surrounds us, he thought. It ran through the halls of Terra like a cold wind. It ran through the hive swamps of North America and through the whisper colonnades of Europa. It spread in glances, rumor, and in the silence of fears left unsaid. It was everywhere, and it was growing. Horus's treachery had shaken all assumptions of loyalty and truth in the Imperium. In a single moment, everything had become unsure. Who else had sided with Horus? Who could be trusted? What would happen? The questions went on without answer. As he looked in his father's eyes, Sigismund reflected that knowing some of the answers gave little comfort.
"The fleet will arrive at Istavan, and whatever happens to them, they will endure. They are your sons." "Do you now regret returning here?"
asked Dorn.
"No, my place is here,"
he said, looking back in his father's face. Command of the Imperial Fist sent to Istavan had been given to Sigismund, but it was a duty that he had not taken. He had asked instead to return to Terra. Dorn had trusted his son and accepted his plea without question. He had kept the real reason to himself, sensing that his father would not understand. Sigismund barely understood it himself, but he had made his decision. That deception had weighed on Sigismund like penitent chains ever since. Dorn smiled.
So certain, so little doubt, he said. Doubt is the greatest weakness, Sigismund frowned.
Dorn raised an eyebrow.
Quoting my own words is unsubtle flattery, or a very subtle rebuke.
The truth is a many-edged blade, quoted Sigismund in a flat voice. Dorn's laughter blew across the platform like brief thunder.
Now you are really trying to provoke me,
growled Dorn, but the words still held a note of laughter. He gripped Sigismund's shoulder.
Thank you, my son,
he said, his voice grave again.
I am glad you are here.
For a moment Sigismund thought of telling him the truth, of telling him why he had returned to Terra. Then his father looked away, and the feeling passed.
And there is more for you here than keeping me from melancholy.
Dorn's eyes had gone to the stars glittering on the horizon's edge, his gaze fixed on where a red spark flickered like a cooling cinder.
It has reached us,
he said.
The treachery is at our threshold.
The reports are true then. Mars is falling.
Yes.
Sigismund felt anger coil through him, and the thought of an enemy so close to the heart of the Imperium. The hate built within him, running through his limbs, in a hot wave, feeding on lesser emotions, until it was a focused line of barely shackled fire. It was this inner fire that had made him a warrior without peer beneath the Emperor and the Primarch whose flesh he shared. For a moment he felt as he had before the encounter on the Phalanx, before everything had changed. He let out a long breath. I will grind the Martian traitors to dust. Dorn shook his head.
There is no time. For now we must secure what we need for the defense of Terra, the armor of the Mundus Oculum and the Mundus Gamma.
Sigismund nodded. If they had not allies remaining amongst the Martian adepts, it would be a punishing task. Punishing, but straightforward. My resources?
You have 4 companies, and Cambadiats will go with you.
To shackle my temper, snarled Sigismund, seeing the wisdom in his father's order even as it pulled at his pride.
All of us need others to balance us.
Dorn inclined his head slightly.
Is that not so, my son?
Sigismund thought of the flicker of uncertainty he had seen in his father's eyes, and the real reason he had asked to return to Terra. He stands at the center of the storm of fear and betrayal, he thought, and I must stand with him, no matter what is to come. It will be done, my lord, he said, and knelt at his father's feet.
Of that I am certain,
said regal Dorn.